The year is 1946. A newborn baby girl is welcomed into the world. One of 12 children in a family so poor that legend has it her parents paid the doctor who delivered her with nothing more than a sack of cornmeal. That little girl was Dolly Rebecca Parton, a name that would one day sparkle across billboards, theaters, movie screens, and concert halls around the globe. Fast forward through the decades, and Dolly Parton isn't just a country music star. She's an institution. She sold over 100 million records worldwide, stacked up 11 Grammy wins out of nearly 50 nominations, built Dollywood into one of America's most beloved theme parks, and even launched a literacy charity, the Imagination Library, that has sent over 200 million free books to children. But behind the wigs, rhinestones, and quick one-liners, Dolly has been living a double life. For 30 years, she built a sparkling public persona that everyone thought they knew, while carefully keeping another quieter self hidden from the spotlight. That contrast, that tug-of-war between Dolly the icon and Dolly the woman, is what makes her story so magnetic. This isn't about scandal or deception. It's about survival. It's about a girl from the Smokies who learned early on that sometimes you have to play a role in public to protect what really matters in private. Dolly Parton's case may have been singing coat of many colors, but her life was stitched together with far more layers than anyone ever imagined. To understand Dolly's double life, we first need to understand just how far she came. Dolly Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, a tiny hamlet near Pittman Center in the Great Smoky Mountains. She was the fourth of 12 children born to Robert Lee Parton, a sharecropper and construction worker, and I. Lee Parton, who kept the family together through music and faith. The story goes that the Partons were so strapped for cash when Dolly was born that her father paid the doctor with a sack of cornmeal. Dolly herself has repeated this anecdote with a laugh over the years, never shying away from her humble beginnings. Poverty, in fact, would later fuel some of her most enduring songs, such as Coat of Many Colors, written about the patchwork coat her mother stitched together from rags. Life in that one-room cabin was crowded, noisy, and full of music. Lee taught her children Appalachian folk songs, and Dolly absorbed the hymns she heard in church. By the time she was 10, she was already performing on local radio stations in Knoxville. And by age 13, she made her first appearance at the Grand Ole Opry, introduced by none other than Johnny Cash. Even then, Dolly knew where she was headed. She once said, "I always knew I was meant for more than a cabin in the woods. I just didn't know how far I'd have to go to get there." True to her word, the very day after she graduated high school in 1964, she packed her bags and moved to Nashville, determined to chase her dream. The early years weren't easy. Nashville was full of hopefuls, and Dolly's high mountain-tinged voice wasn't exactly the mainstream sound of the time. But persistence was her secret weapon. She signed with Monument Records, initially pushed toward pop, but found her footing in country. Her breakthrough came when Porter Wagoner, the star of The Porter Wagoner Show, invited her to join him on television in 1967. That partnership turned Dolly into a household name. Together, they recorded duets, toured the country, and built a loyal fan base. But behind the smiles and matching outfits, Dolly was already proving she had another life inside her, one where she wasn't content to be anyone's sidekick. In 1974, Dolly made the painful decision to leave Wagner's show to pursue a solo career. To soften the blow, she wrote I Will Always Love You, a farewell ballad that would go on to become one of the most famous songs in history. That one act sums up Dolly's double life perfectly. Sweet on the surface, rooted in tough decisions, ambition, and the need to define herself on her own terms. The girl who started with nothing but a cornmeal birthright was now well on her way to becoming a star. But stardom requires more than a good voice. It requires a carefully crafted image. And that's where Dolly's other life really started to take shape. If you ask Dolly Parton about her style, she will tell you straight. It costs a lot of money to look this cheap. That one-liner delivered with a wink sums up the deliberate genius of her persona. In the 1970s, country music was still defined by men in cowboy hats, and women expected to play it sweet and demure. Dolly decided to blow that up. She piled her hair into sky-high wigs, painted her lips bright red, and wore rhinestone gowns that sparkled like a disco ball under stage lights. She once confessed that her look was inspired by what she called the town back home. A woman whispered about behind closed doors, but remembered for her boldness. Dolly thought, if that's trashy, then trashy sure looks fun. But here is the secret. Dolly's glitz was not just fashion. It was armor. By creating Dolly Parton the big hair, the busted dresses, the exaggerated femininity, she gave audiences something so dazzling to focus on that they often forgot to dig deeper. Behind that armor, Dolly could keep her private life exactly that, private. She took this commitment so seriously that she has admitted to sleeping in her makeup. Why? Because if a fire or an earthquake struck in the middle of the night, she wanted to be ready to meet the public without breaking the illusion. Imagine carrying that much about your image. It sounds exhausting, but for Dolly, it was survival in an industry quick to dismiss women as has-beens the moment they looked too ordinary. Of course, Dolly turned the scrutiny to her advantage. When tabloids speculated about plastic surgery, she beat them to the punch with a joke. If something's bagging, sagging, or dragging, I'll tuck it, suck it, or pluck it, she once quipped. In doing so, she flipped vulnerability into punchlines, staying in control of the narrative. But perhaps the most fascinating part is how she balanced transparency with secrecy. Dolly could talk for hours about her wigs, her makeup routine, or even her exaggerated bust line. But when it came to the more intimate corners of her life, her marriage, her struggles, her faith, she tightened the curtain. Fans thought they knew her, but the truth is they only knew the version she wanted them to see. This balancing act wasn't deception. It was strategy. By building Dolly the spectacle, she protected Dolly the soul. She carved out a space where she could survive the pressures of fame, remain in charge of her career, and still keep her deepest truth sacred. And yet, as we'll see, Dolly's contradictions only multiplied. She was the glittering queen of country, but she was also the woman who shocked fans by posing for Playboy. She was a devout Christian, writing gospel music, while simultaneously chasing crossover success on the pop and rock charts. She was generous and philanthropic, but also shrewdly business-minded, turning herself into a brand decades before that became a norm. The wig and the rhinestones weren't just a look. They were the mask that let her live two lives. One for the world and one for herself. By the time the rhinestones were blinding and the wigs reached skyscraper heights, Dolly Parton had built herself into a brand. But every brand has its fine print, and Dolly's was written in invisible ink. Let's start with the most enduring mystery, her marriage. Dolly Parton married Carl Thomas Dean on May 30th, 1966. The ceremony was tiny, just Dolly, Carl, her mother, the preacher, and the preacher's wife. Carl was her partner for nearly 6 decades. Yet for most fans, he's a ghost. He rarely appears in public, never attends red carpets, and the man has declined interviews with a consistency that could win Olympic gold. This just fueled endless speculation. Was he real? Were they secretly divorced? Was Dolly covering up some hidden romantic life? She leaned into the rumors with humor, once joking that people thought she had a mannequin in the closet she called Carl. In reality, Carl simply hated the spotlight. While Dolly was building Dollywood, touring stadiums, and starring in 9 to 5, Carl was running an asphalt paving company and living a low-key life in Nashville. That contrast is so epic, Dolly dazzling in sequins, Carl in work boots at home. It was one of the clearest examples of her double life. And then there's Dolly's faith. She's never shied away from talking about her Christianity. Growing up in the Smokies, gospel music was stitched into her DNA. She's released multiple gospel albums and insists she prays every day. Yet in 1978, Dolly shocked conservative fans when she posed for Playboy. She didn't pose nude. She wore the famous bunny suit ears, and all but the idea of a gospel-singing country girl appearing in Playboy was almost scandalous. Dolly brushed it off, later laughing that she did it because she looked kind of cute back then and wanted to flaunt it while she could. That contradiction Bible in one hand, bunny ears in the other is pure Dolly. She never fit neatly into one box. And maybe that's the key. The double life wasn't about hiding sins. It was about refusing to be pinned down. Her music tells the same story. Remember that on one single night in 1973, she wrote two of her biggest songs, Jolene and I Will Always Love You. One is about jealousy and temptation. The other is about tender farewell. To channel such different emotions in a single sitting hints at how many emotional worlds Dolly was navigating at once. Then there's her business empire. Fans see Dollywood as a theme park full of roller coasters and cinnamon bread. But behind the curtain, Dolly is an astute businesswoman. She owns multiple companies under the Dollywood umbrella, has invested in media ventures, and has built her brand with surgical precision. And yet, she plays down this version of herself, often playing the role of just a country girl making multi-million-dollar decisions. That's another version of her double life, the savvy CEO hiding under the sparkly gowns. And then there is philanthropy. Dolly's Imagination Library, launched in 1995, has mailed over 200 million free books to children across the globe. She has funded hospitals and scholarships and famously donated $1 million toward COVID-19 vaccine research at Vanderbilt University. Yet, she is always quick to make light of her generosity, insisting she does not do it for praise. Dolly once said, "I just think it's important to give back if you've been blessed, and I've been more blessed than I ever deserved." Still, even her philanthropy holds a double edge. The public sees the generosity. Dolly sees a mission rooted in her childhood poverty and her faith, the side of her life she often keeps quieter. So by the 1980s and 90s, Dolly was living two parallel tracks, one blindingly public, one fiercely private, and both were working in harmony. But here's the thing, keeping up two lives is not easy, which begs the question, why did she cling to that separation for so long? Living two lives may sound glamorous, but in reality, it is more like juggling fire. Dolly managed to keep it up for decades. And the reasons run deeper than wigs and witty comebacks. First, there is the sheer pressure of fame. Imagine waking up every day knowing millions of people feel entitled to your story, your secrets, your heartbreaks. Dolly knew early that fame can eat you alive if you do not set the boundaries. By creating a glittering version of herself, she gave fans something to feast on while keeping the tender parts of her heart locked away. It was self-preservation in sequence. Speaking of gender, Dolly entered country music in the 1960s when women were often expected to be sweet, submissive, and secondary. By exaggerating her femininity, the makeup, the wigs, the humor about her figure, she seized control of the joke before anyone else could use it against her. When critics called her too flashy, she laughed louder. When they mocked her bust, she turned it into a punchline. That's power. And that persona let her climb ladders that might have otherwise been pulled away. Thirdly, there's control. Dolly wasn't just a singer. She was a songwriter and businesswoman. She owns her publishing rights. A move that secured her millions when Whitney Houston's version of I Will Always Love You became one of the best-selling singles of all time. She knew that to stay in control of her music and her money, she had to play the long game. The public Dolly distracted the world while the private Dolly signed contracts, built empires, and played chess while everyone else thought she was playing checkers. But make no mistake, the double life carried risks.